Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan AGAJAINIan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping here at the Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue in the heart of Hollywood, and this is the historic Max Factor building. My guests today are artist Lola Rose Thompson and author Cliff Ashpaugh. I'm not sure if artist Lola Thompson knows where to find her roots because she moved around with her mother, who is director Lyndall Hobbs, to 7 or 8 different places while she was growing up. So she attended Campbell Hall in Los Angeles, the Hewitt School in New York, the Catholic Girls Convent in Sydney, Australia, the Chicago Art Institute, and the School of Art in Los Angeles, Otis School of Art. So you graduated with honors from Otis, which meant you really wanted to be an artist, right?
Yes.
How and when did that happen in your career? Because you kind of come from a showbiz background, don't you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, as a child, I kind of thought it was funny to always say, I'll never be an actress, I'll never be in show business. So I don't know, I have a hard time knowing when exactly I decided I would become an artist, but it just became more and more important in my life, and all of a sudden it was the only thing, you know, the thing that made me the happiest.
Was it in high school? Was that what was happening?
I did a lot of art in high school, and I had a really amazing teacher who's, you know, still one of my great friends.
Really? Mm-hmm. Here in LA?
Yes.
Oh, because you were at Otis. Who was teaching there at the time?
Well, in fact, it was my teacher from high school who was really inspired me to go to art school. But when I went to Otis, I was also working at the same time for Robert Graham. And, you know, working with him was an amazing part of my life and definitely inspired me to work harder and really go for it.
Well, while you were in school, you were assisting Bob, who was a sculptor. Did that change your way of looking at art? Because you were talking about being a painter and he was sculpting people. How did that fit into your genre of what you were doing?
I used to make more sculptures. In art school, I only took sculpture and performance.
You did?
I never started painting until about 2 years ago.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So Bob did have a big influence. Of course, Robert Graham passed away a few years ago. He's a fantastic sculptor. Beautiful work all over the city and in museum collections everywhere. And the godfather to my 2 daughters. And I think we probably met at Bob's studio years ago,
Yes.
Which I just remembered when we were talking about it today. We miss Bob a lot because he was such an influence on life in Los Angeles as well as the art scene of Los Angeles. So you were very lucky to be in the studio with him. You talked about, should I be an actress, shouldn't I be an actress? You come from a showbiz background. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, both my parents are in the business. My dad is a comedy writer. My mom is a writer and director. And although, you know, there's a lot of things about showbiz that are fun and glamorous, people just never seemed that happy to me that I saw who were doing that. So, and, you know, I saw my mom being really frustrated by her, you know, by not being able to do exactly what she wanted. And
You mean
so,
in the business?
Yeah. And so,
but she was living with a famous actor in Los Angeles. You were being raised by him. Who was coming in and out of the house?
I mean, everyone. She had epic parties, you know, from Madonna to Warren Beatty to you know, Jack Nicholson. There were
Angelica was there a lot,
Angelica
I know.
Houston, yes.
Because I remember her parties. And Al Pacino was there at the time. Any other like heavy-duty male actors were coming in. Did they influence you?
No.
None of that did. None of it. But they were all into the art scene because there were artists in and out of those parties as well.
There were. I mean, I was really pretty young at that time. I think I learned from that how to maybe throw a good party if I ever had a nice house.
But there weren't artists around.
I can't remember really hanging with that many artists.
Yeah, I was going to
at
say
that
then.
I mean, Bob Graham was the only one
Is that right?
that I remember.
So it wasn't. So there wasn't that kind of an influence from artists in your life. And when you went to the Chicago Art Institute, were you into painting then?
I was making sculpture in ceramics and doing kind of weird performance and writing a lot of poetry. And it wasn't until I started working for Bob Graham that you know, the main thing I realized from him was just how much harder I had to work if I wanted to be a successful artist.
Yeah, and writing goes back to your father, who was a veteran comedy writer. Is he in London or here?
He was here.
He was here. And your mother's from Australia, so I guess that's why you were back and forth traveling so much.
Yeah.
And moving around. Did that affect you? Is that a good background for an artist to have?
I think it helped. I mean, we went to so many museums in different cities, and I think it just made me more cultured and adaptable. And
you work with certain types of media now, and I think one of them is this, which is pretty interesting, neon. How did you learn to do that?
well, yeah, I mean, I think that I work in lots of different mediums, so that's my first neon piece, and I didn't actually do the glass bending. I took it to a place, but you know, I just had to make the to-scale drawing. But even feeling like it was a possibility to make something in neon is, you know.
Did you choose the color and choose the?
Yeah.
So you did all of that. And I'm going to show something else because I think these pictures are multi. What kind of art do you call this? Do you have a name?
Painting?
Just painting? I don't know. Is there a certain media that you use?
This is oil on panel. So for the last 2 years, I've been making a lot of oil paintings and watercolors.
So watercolor can't be on panel. Are
No.
panels found objects?
No, I make them. So this
Trade
one,
negotiations?
So, you know, in the future, I think that Syria will be a piece of pizza, and Saudi Arabia will be this kind of rainbow mermaid, and Israel is just like this intense squiggle. And it's kind of about, like, you know, how we're all getting more and more digital, and but basically it's kind of whimsical and surreal. And so these are these aliens, and they're doing trade negotiations, you know, after the delegates have all met at the hotel.
And is this your show, Future?
That's from my show, Future Delegates,
So
which
this
is
is
up
yeah,
right now.
which is on Santa Fe downtown.
Yeah.
And this one, I love this, Gangsters.
Gangsters Gloating. That's a watercolor on black paper.
And how do you get the watercolor to show up? Black paper usually isn't what people do watercolors on.
No, when I buy the paper at the art store, you know, the woman said, "You can't do watercolors on black paper." But I do a lot of layers, and I use these really concentrated watercolors that I got in Paris last year that are just so beautiful and kind of strong colors. But I do mostly wet on wet, so you know.
That's still harder on black, isn't it?
Yeah.
This
it's
is
hard.
wonderful.
I mean, I use a lot.
I love all these. And are these characters that you know?
I mean, I just kind of make them up. I look at a lot of references. One of them is like this rapper Kendrick Lamar. Of course, Spider-Man is there, and, you know, they're just kind of from my imagination.
But somebody doesn't sit for you. Do you ever use someone sitting for you?
Occasionally. I don't really have enough money to hire a model, but I would love to. You know, when I worked for Bob, he would sometimes let me draw with him when he had models.
Oh, did he? Yeah, because he had models in all the time. I love this. This is like a whole tableau. How large is this piece?
maybe 3.5 by 4 feet.
Oh, it's pretty big. And what media?
That's oil on paper.
And tell us about it.
Well, that was a story that I read about in the New York Times, where I get a lot of ideas for paintings, and it was about this Count Kirill, and he had a $100,000 Breguet watch on.
I remember.
And all these, people started talking about it and making a big fuss, and so then the Russians photoshopped the picture, and they took the watch out, and then of course everyone noticed, and lots of people.
It was even bigger, right?
Yes, it became an even bigger story that they were trying to hide the fact that he was wearing this watch.
And it made such an impression on you that you.
Well, I think I just like the idea of something being there and then not being there, and I'm also really interested in kind of religious figures and politicians and just stories from the newspaper.
Do you think that you would call your work figurative or more abstract?
Figurative.
More figurative. And I think this is great because this has a very, to me, abstract feeling, but it's quite figurative and has a lot of movement. And tell us about this piece.
This was a piece I made in Australia this Christmas, and it's one of the loosest ones that I've done.
And what's it on?
It's a watercolor on black paper, and I think there's also a little bit of oil pastel. Actually, that one was, I had taken this psychedelic drug called DMT, and that was inspired by that, and it was kind of the people that I saw.
But you can see a difference. You can see a different inspiration in this. And it has a lot of movement. And do you remember back when you were doing it?
I mean, I do remember. I think I was trying to capture these kind of very, very vibrant, colorful images that I saw. But, there's a little text part that says, I suggest gentle exercise. I think I was thinking about, we visited someone at an old people's home, and I was thinking about that.
But you know what it reminds me of? Basquiat, because he used to pick up words and different sayings that had gone on during the day and would add them on his paper. Have you done that before?
I use text a lot in my work. I mean, all of my pieces have long titles, and I think that language just lets me, add a whole nother meaning and inject context into my work.
Does any of the things that Chris Thompson, your dad, writes come into play here? Have you used any of his words?
No, but a lot of people say that my work is funny. And
so
recently at my show, I was just watching people laugh as they walked around and looked at all the pieces. So maybe I inherited a little bit of.
So we see the text. It's great, the text and that very loose movement. Where are we going next? Are you going to be painting big murals? Are you going to go sculpting? What are you going to do?
Well, making this neon piece was so fun that I think I'm going to try to make some more neon. And yeah, I'm just going to keep painting. I have a show in New Orleans in a few months coming up. And
so do you paint for a show, or do they pick what you have?
Both. Sometimes they'll pick from works that I've already made. For this show that I just recently had, I made all the paintings for that show. And
we're going to look for Lola Rose. I love your name, Lola Rose Thompson. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joan.
And thanks for watching this part of the show. We'll be right back with author Cliff Ashpaugh. Hi, welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm Joan Quinn, and I'm with author Cliff Ashpaugh, who was born in Ohio but raised in Southern California, where he attended Mount San Antonio College and Cal State San Bernardino, all down in that hot area, hot temperature-wise. He was in the Air Force, where he worked as a nuclear Minuteman missile silo inspector?
Technician.
Technician. What does that mean? What's that all about?
That means I worked on support buildings and on the missile silos themselves that supported the Minuteman missiles.
Wow.
And should we ever need them, to protect ourselves. On the hangar where I worked, it said pieces are perfection. They went on the philosophy of mad. You would be mad to use them. So
You'd be crazy.
Yes.
So we always think about being peaceful.
Absolutely.
So what took you to the Air Force? Did you go after high school?
I was married shortly after high school. My wife and I had a son, and then I had a problem getting work. She left. Felt sorry for myself for a few days, so I went out and joined the Air Force.
Oh, is that what it was?
She called me a day or two later, said she wanted to come back. I said, fine, but I'm leaving for boot camp in 2 weeks. I'll come home and get you when I get out, if you want. And then we were together for 35 years.
And then where'd you go to boot camp?
Lackland Air Force Base in Texas.
Oh, in Texas. Another hot spot.
Another hot spot. But from there I went to the cold. I went up to Rantoul, Illinois for a year's training in missile technology. And
then you went to college?
Yeah, I went on the GI Bill.
Well, that was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And that's where I learned my love for writing. I flunked my first attempt at freshman composition.
So that wasn't a very good thing for a writer.
No, but what it was the work was boring. I got too creative, and the professor didn't like what I was doing. So he started giving me F's. I took it to another professor, and I said, this is good work. Too late for me to drop out.
But it's also the kind of thing that happens when you're writing. It's also subjective, you know.
Yes.
One person likes something, one person doesn't, and it could have stamped you for life. And you wouldn't have written Josh's Wall.
Well, what happened was my second professor, he recommended I take a creative writing course. And a couple of the stories I turned into the college writing contest. I won a first place, and it was an up yours to the first professor.
Exactly. So that must have been the point when you did decide you could write. Were you writing full time then?
I've been writing pretty much ever since. I've gotten frustrated a few times, taken a break from it, but I've always returned. But
so the big published work, which they're calling you a first-time author, I guess, or first-time published, I guess, is a novella. What's the difference compared to a novel and a short story?
That's a good question. Not anyone on the face of the earth knows the exact answer to that. Some people say a novella is 17,000 to 40,000 words. Others will say 20 to 50. But it's a pedigreed art form.
Why? What is it? Why is it? How do you make it special? How do you make it a novella?
A novella doesn't have the length of a novel. A novel usually contains subplots, inner plots and stories. A novella usually contains threads going through that gives it that feeling of a big story.
But you have to make it the big story by what you're putting in it, right?
Absolutely.
And so here's your book, Josh's Wall. Who is Josh, and what's the story?
Josh starts off, well, the beginning of the book, he's an adult, wants to teach a lesson to his son Michael, so he writes a book for him. And it's about him when he was a child. He had an adverse reaction to penicillin at the age of 6, woke up from a coma with amnesia. And he goes on a quest to learn who he was, who he is, who he's going to be. But his blocked memories stop him from his quest. And he's also picked on by bullies at school. He's pretty much a loner.
So almost just less than 200 pages.
Yes.
You tell that story. Is it autobiographical?
Oh, there's quite a bit of semi-autobiographical material to it. I had an adverse reaction to penicillin when I was a child.
What about your father? Is the father in here fictional, or was it really based on your dad?
I based a lot of him on my own father.
Who was kind of...
gung-ho, get out there, fight them, you protect yourself against the bullies.
Oh, yeah. So here he comes up against bullying, right?
Yes.
And did you come up against bullying?
Yeah, I was bullied when I was...
But you know, it's such a problem. It's a bigger problem than we really know.
It's always been there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're talking way back into your childhood. And why is it always there? And why do we feel like it's such a big problem now?
Well, in the past few years, we've had quite a few suicides. We've had quite a bit of violence brought on that they've attributed to bullying.
Yes,
and
I know.
it's come into the limelight, and schools are really getting into it to try and keep it to a minimum.
But let's focus on it. What is it? And in what forms does it take place? Because it takes place in a lot of different forms.
Oh, well, the obvious are boys picking on other boys physically, but they say what's even worse than that is the bullying among the women, cyberbullying.
Yes, that's another problem.
Picking on groups, picking on loners, usually, or one particular person in a group picking on loners. Putting other people down. That's all bullying. Anytime you have any kind of authoritative position, whether it's with peer groups or anywhere, and you pick on others, it's a form of bullying.
It doesn't have to be physical.
No, not at all. It can be psychological, mental.
And in the book, is it physical or is it psychological?
It combines quite a few different groupings of bullying. Even the principal of the school becomes a bully in a way.
So how is that action learned? How do people learn to be bullies?
Well, it comes from all angles, everything from parents to government to anyone in a position of power, anyone an authoritative figure can teach someone else to become a bully. They can learn in that respect.
And then how do you break that cycle?
Well, Josh's way of breaking was rather unique. You'd have to read the book for that.
Well, give us some clues, because people are going to read the book because they want to know about this, because it's a very interesting subject.
His father, when he went to his father, told him about his bully problems, his father's answer was, take you to learn karate. This was in the days...
Learn how to fight back.
Defend yourself. Fight back. You're a man. You're not a crybaby. You're not a sissy.
Right. That's one thing that...
And
but that doesn't break the cycle, does it?
actually, it made it worse. He beats the one bully, but the kid wasn't really a bully because of his amnesia. He didn't remember
I see.
what happened before the amnesia came. So he beat him, got in trouble for school. They're getting down on him and actually starting to bully him because they see him as a rebel rouser rather than an academician.
So we're not just talking about fighting,
Right.
are we?
No.
It's not just a regular boy
That's where it
fights boy.
starts. Most books regarding bullies, someone learns to defend themselves, they fight the bully off, everyone lives happily ever after, the story's over. Think of Karate Kid. That's actually where this story begins, and it gets deep into the psychology and the trust, the truth of the matter. It's a search for truth for Josh.
You go back and you talk about bullying starting in caveman days either, right? And that the father's always teaching the behavior and that type of thing.
Not always.
Not always? Okay.
Yeah. The bullies, Josh actually becomes a hero. You have to be a hero to do what he did. The bullies just start coming out of the woodwork. There's always going to be someone thinking they're bigger and better than you. He beats the one bully. They know he knows karate now, and they all want to come and beat the karate kid.
Oh, they do want to do that.
Yeah. They all think they're bigger and better. And
You do a lot of readings, and at the readings, what are some of the questions that people ask you?
oh, how did I come up with the idea of Josh's Wall? The title is one of the questions I'm asked the most.
And what is that?
Several reasons. It's metaphorical. In his bedroom, he has a wall with pictures that he doesn't know what they're
'cause he's
about.
in
And he
the
also has, which is very important, a Reese's peanut butter cup wrapper tacked on the wall. He has no idea where that come from because all that was done before he gained amnesia.
Before.
And the Reese's peanut butter cup is one of the main
Does it follow the thread that you were talking
Yes, follows
about?
the thread through to the end when he finally gains his memories and he realizes that that first bully wasn't really a bully.
Oh, so
And it started the whole chain of events down to the end of the novel where it all comes together.
and and at your readings, are people involved more with the social aspect of what's happened, or the way you wrote it? How did you write it? Did you write it on a computer?
I actually wrote a different incarnation of this, finished it about a dozen years ago, and a publisher picked it up. They put me back 6 months, and then another 6 months before publication, and then they went belly up.
I see.
And I decided, I don't need those kind of frustrations. I'm never going to write another novel.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, that was it.
And had you written that on the computer?
No, that was early computers. It was probably
So
computerized by the
handwriting.
time that came out. I started writing back when typewriter days.
Yeah, because in typewriter, because Jackie Collins
Back in
writes
mid-'80s,
Yeah,
yeah.
she writes everything on a legal pad, all by
Yeah.
hand, and then someone transcribes it. But you did a typewriter.
Back, I had a typewriter in the trunk of my car, and that's what I wrote my first stories on. That's what I won the awards with. And
Oh, great.
Josh's Wall also came from the hymn "Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho."
Oh, very
and the
good.
walls came tumbling down.
Oh, very good. I like that.
As a matter of fact, the final biggest bully he confronts in the book is named Jerry Cole.
Oh my gosh, I
So
love it. That's great.
There's a lot of metaphor and a lot of symbolism.
A lot
to
of
the
it.
book.
And also, I'm sure as we talked, the people were interested in how you wrote it and the social aspects of it.
Yeah. What happened was I was never going to write again. So I went out, I lived on a sailboat, go sailing all over, the South. And a Frenchman moved to my marina, and he had no storm experience. He wanted me to take him out to a storm, so I did, because I had some experience. Terrible trip, so I decided, okay, I'm going to write a magazine article about it. In my head, it grew into a book, then it grew into a novel. So, okay, I'm writing again. I'm writing another novel. It's been a few years since I've done it, so I better go back to school and work on my craft. And I met a professor, John Branningham. And I was talking to him about this novella I had written previously. He said, hey, can I read it? After he read it, he got back and said, this has to get published. This is great. And I'm thinking in this climate, this day and age, the commercial publishers don't want novellas.
Right.
It's still big in Europe.
Oh, because he was a Frenchman, so he knew.
No, not
but
the professor. That was the
the person who introduced you to the professor.
Turned out John Branningham's wife, Anne, owned a publishing firm, and she specialized in novellas.
Oh,
and they're up
fabulous.
and coming. They're a lot more popular now. In fact, in 2010, a novella titled Tinkers won the Pulitzer.
Oh, fantastic. So you're on the road. You
Yes.
did the right thing.
Yeah.
Cliff Ashpaugh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.